The following presentation is based on content from my new book, The Great Gold and Silver Rush of the 21st Century. To read the free online chapters or order the book, please go to ggsr21.com. Thanks. Welcome to The Great Gold and Silver Rush of the 21st Century, Part 1, backed by the full faith and credit of you. So, this is about how you have been monetized. You are what gives the purchasing power in currency. You're the reason that people have faith in it, and the reason we use it as a medium of exchange. It is said that fiat currencies are faith-based, that they only have purchasing power because you have faith in them. That because they purchased something yesterday, we all have faith that they'll purchase roughly the same amount tomorrow. And I actually hope that this book shakes your faith to its very foundation, because faith in fiat currency is akin to faith in forgery, fabrication, falsehood, and fraud. As I said back in Chapter 1, today the vast majority of currency is created by just typing numbers into computers. So please ask yourself, how many numbers are there? What is the limit to currency creation? One of the key attributes of money is that it must be a store of value. You know, I was having this discussion with somebody recently, and I said, what are the attributes of money? And I was arguing that it had to store purchasing power. And this guy said, well, not necessarily. And so I went online and I just typed, attributes of money. And the very first thing is the Federal Reserve. And it listed the functions that money has to have to be called money. And the very first one was a store of value. It's the most important out of all of these. I mean, it also has to be a medium of exchange and a unit of account and such. But a store of value is number one. And in Chapter 1, I believe that I proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that no nation today uses real money. And I said, if you're talking with somebody and you tell them that national fiat currencies aren't money, and they say, oh, no, we use the euro or the British pound or the yen or the yuan, and our currency is money. Ask them, do you believe money is a store of value, that money should be a store of value? And if they say yes, then ask them, is there inflation? And if they say yes, then ask them, but aren't those two things mutually exclusive? I mean, if there is inflation, that means that the currency is losing purchasing power. It isn't the stuff that's changing, it's the currency that's changing. It's losing value, and therefore it is not money. So real money does not require faith. The purchasing power of an ounce of gold is simply the market placing a value on the rarity, the time, and the effort that's required to produce it, which is equal to the time and effort that you must put in working to acquire it, which is also equal to the value of the things that you can buy with it. In other words, if you're purchasing a home with gold coins, it takes very few gold coins to purchase a house. So if you're purchasing that house with gold coins, it's a fair transaction, because the time and effort that's put into prospecting, developing a mine, mining the ore, refining it, pouring it into bars, and melting those bars and minting them into coins is equal to the time and effort that you put in to earning enough gold coins to buy a home, which is also equal to the value of the time, effort, materials, cutting down all of the trees, creating lumber, digging up all of the ore to create the copper for the plumbing pipe and the wiring, digging up enough dirt to make the cement that goes into the home. All of those things added up equal the time and effort that it takes to get that gold out of the ground and mint it into a coin. So these two things, and the amount of work that you had to do to acquire those coins, it's a fair trade. When we transact with currency, it's fraud. We're trading nothing. We're imagining a number into existence and trading that for something of real value. When we transact with money, it's a fair trade. We're transacting with something of value for something of equal value. This is the reason that gold and silver have always been called honest money. Money stores value, currency, as you will see in this chapter, currency steals value. So even though faith is not required for gold and silver, I have put my faith in them. Going shopping. This piece is simply about how banks work. Banks get to counterfeit currency into existence. So does the central bank. They are the base counterfeiter, and the commercial banks are pyramided on top of they do counterfeiting on top of counterfeiting. This is perfectly legal for them to do, and they justify this by saying when they create new currency that now everyone feels richer, so they'll spend more, and that will really make them richer. Some economists say this, and it's obviously insane. If you create a bunch of currency and you hand it out to everybody, prices of all the goods and services are quickly going to rise to account for that currency and neutralize that currency, basically absorbing any extra purchasing power that has been put into the system. And the problem is that is not evenly spread around. It's whoever touches that currency first, whoever types it into existence and then buys something with it that gets the maximum purchasing power out of it. And then as it circulates, the purchasing power diminishes. And the reason it's important is whoever doesn't touch that newly created currency won't get any of its benefits. In fact, these are the people, those who don't receive the new currency, who pay for it who pay the cost of the newly acquired richness of those who do receive it, and they pay for it through the tax known as inflation, as prices rise faster than their wages, causing all of the things they want and need to be priced ever further from their grasp. So essentially, we can divide the world into three types of people: those who create the currency, those who receive its benefits, and those who pay the price. And you'll see at the end of part 8 of this chapter, so the very last video in this chapter, you will see a quote from the Federal Reserve that they do know that they are creating this wealth transfer when they create new currency. So they are admitting that, since we know that currency printing is theft, we can recharacterize these groups as 1, the robbers, 2, the beneficiaries, and 3, the victims. So when you see that quote at the end of the last video about the Federal Reserve knowing that currency creation imparts gains to the first receivers of the currency at the expense of those who don't receive it, when you see that, they are admitting that they are the robbers here. So anyway, moving on, the currency confidence con job. We learned in Chapter 1 that there are 3 forms of currency. There's 2 forms of base currency. The first form of base currency is this bank reserves, and the public never sees, touches, or uses the bank reserves. It's a separate monetary system only used for interbank settlement. The second form of base currency is the paper notes that are in your purse or wallet. The Federal Reserve notes in the United States that we use, and that's the only type of central bank currency that the public actually uses. And that is a very small portion of the currency, less than 10% of the currency supply, or right around 10% of the currency supply. So 9 out of every $10 that we use is the third form of currency, which is bank credit. And you'll see how banks create that in just a moment. So how is currency created? What are bank reserves? What is in your wallet? And what is in your bank account? Well, as it turns out, the paper notes that are in circulation, the Federal Reserve notes that are in your wallet, are those paper notes are central IOUs from the central bank that the central bank just imagines into existence, and to get them into circulation, they buy something with them. Your bank account is nothing but digits that are reminders that the bank owes you central bank IOUs. So the digits are basically an IOU for an IOU. This whole thing gets even more insane as we go. It truly is crazy, and it's evil. This is fundamentally an evil monetary system that benefits the few at the expense of the many. And it enslaves all of us, as you will see. So, in other words, bank credit is IOUs for IOUs. There's approximately 10 times more bank credit IOUs for IOUs than paper currency IOUs. And that is because the bank credit IOUs are created whenever you take out a loan, and there's a lot more loans being made in a society at any given time than the central bank is busy making out IOUs and buying stuff with them. Bank reserves are part of a completely separate monetary system I was talking about, and they're only used between banks. So this is what the banks have in their checking accounts at the central bank, like at the Federal Reserve. There's about 10 times more bank credit IOUs for IOUs in existence than there are Federal Reserve or central bank IOUs, and that's because we take out so many more loans for houses and cars and things like that. Getting back to bank reserves, they're part of that completely separate monetary system that's only used for interbank settlement, and that system is based on basically what equates to a checking account that the commercial banks have at the central bank. So those digits only exist really inside the computers at the Federal Reserve or the ECB, and it's used for this interbank settlement. So the entire monetary system is just IOUs. If it's just IOUs, what is it that they owe us? And so this will never happen, but theoretically, if everyone, including the banks and the public, were to try and redeem their IOUs from each other, then the banks would have to pay the public their deposits, and they would pay in those central bank IOUs, paper Federal Reserve notes, minus whatever the public owes the bank for any loans. So it would be whatever net balance there is, your bank account minus whatever you owe, you would get back in these paper currency, these base currency notes. The public would then have to go to the central bank to redeem their paper IOUs, and the banks would have to go to the central bank to redeem any of their bank reserves. At the end of the line is the central bank, and since all central bank IOUs are a liability on their balance sheet, they've got assets and liabilities. The liability is all of the IOUs that they create, whether it's bank reserve IOUs or the paper currency and circulation IOUs. Those are liabilities against the assets of the central bank. So what are the central bank's assets? It's mostly the sovereign debt of whatever country that central bank issues IOUs for. In the United States, the central bank that we have issues US dollar IOUs. And so the asset that backs those, though, is mostly U.S. Treasury bills, bonds, and notes. And so what are those Treasury bonds, notes, bills, notes, and bonds? A Treasury is an IOU which promises to pay the bearer of the IOU, whoever bought that IOU, your future taxes. All of us have to work in the future to pay taxes, to pay the principal and the interest due on that bond, which was an IOU that the Treasury gave when they borrowed some currency. And so it's all owed back. So the entire world monetary system can be summed up in just 6 letters. IOU, YOU. IOU, you. All banks, whether they are central banks or commercial banks, do not lend anything that already exists. Instead, they just imagine a number, and then they lend it to you with interest. Question: what gives cash like Federal Reserve notes value? What backs them? Answer: when the Federal Reserve buys an asset like a U.S. Treasury bill, note, or bond, which is an IOU from the Treasury for revenues from future taxation, your future taxation, The central bank imagines some IOU numbers that match the imagined amount of the IOUs they are buying from the Treasury. Since U.S. Treasuries are IOUs for future tax revenues, what backs the newly imagined Federal Reserve U.S. dollar IOUs are the future hours you must work to pay your taxes. Stop paying your taxes, and you go to jail. This guarantees to the Federal Reserve that you will work in the future to make good on their IOUs. Question: how do commercial banks create bank credit IOUs for IOUs? The answer is, when you take out a loan for a house or a car, the bank imagines a number that matches the imagined value of the collateral that you're offering, and then it types those numbers into your checking account. That number is simply a reminder to the bank that it owes you that amount of central bank paper IOUs. Question: what backs the IOUs in your account? What gives those digits in your checking account value? Answer: it's the hours you must work in the future to make the payments on your mortgage or your car loan. Your house or your car secures, it guarantees, the value of those IOUs. If you stop making payments on your house or your car, the bank will take them. This also guarantees to the bank that you will work in the future to make good on their IOUs. So the only thing that gives any national currency value is the extraction of future work hours from you. Therefore, you have been monetized. As I said back in Chapter 1, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. Go ask Alice. This is an excerpt from Joshua Marie's book, Debt by Design. It's a great little book. I encourage you to read it. Readers are encouraged to stop for a minute and contemplate the circular reasoning that underpins our debt-based monetary system. The public believe that deposits have value. The value of the deposits is determined by the value of the loans. The value of the loans is determined by the ability of the public to repay their debt. And there you have the circular argument. Looking at the reasoning in reverse, the ability of the public to repay their debt determines the value of the loans, and the value of the loans determines the value of the deposits. Consequently, if the public ever tried to determine what it is that instills value into their deposits, they would end up staring into a mirror. This epiphany is uncomfortable and bewildering for many. This circular reasoning is equivalent to the term literary nonsense used to describe Alice in Wonderland. Now, getting back to the story I'm telling here, if you don't believe me about all of these claims that I've just made, here are some direct quotes from the central banks. This is mostly from the Bank of England. And I do want to thank Joshua Marie for his book, Debt by Design. You can pick up a copy at fairmoney.info. You can also go to the Bank of England and download their quarterly bulletin, Money Creation in the Modern Economy, or to Joshua Marie's site, and you can get a copy of this pamphlet. It's very simple and short to read, but here are a few quotes that I pulled from it, and this applies to all central banks. When it comes to currency creation, they all work pretty much the same. When it comes to QE, the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve work pretty much identically. So these are the quotes. They call it money. I call it currency, but these are quotes, so I'm going to say money. And you need to know that whenever they say broad money, they're talking about the type of currency that we use, the public. Whenever they say narrow money, they're talking about the type of currency that the banks only use. And so here are a few of their quotes. Broad money is made up of bank deposits, which are essentially IOUs from a commercial bank to households and companies. So there you have it, Bank of England. Your deposits in your checking account are IOUs from the commercial company to households and companies. And currency, which is mostly IOUs from the central bank. So the currency that we use, broad money is their term for it, broad currency, I'll call it, is IOUs from the commercial bank to households and companies, and currency, which is IOUs from the central bank. Reserves are an IOU from the central bank to commercial banks. Reserves can only be lent between banks since consumers do not have access to reserves accounts at the Bank of England. The next quote, commercial banks create money in the form of bank deposits by making new loans. For this reason, some economists refer to bank deposits as fountain pen money created at the stroke of a banker's pen when they approve loans. And the final quote, deposits are simply a record of how much the bank itself owes its customers. So now that we've learned all of this, please digest this for a little while. Play certain sections again. Talk to somebody about it. Understand how you have been monetized and how this whole system transfers wealth from you to the few through this construction of this very elaborate device called the monetary system, and that it is fundamentally, by the time you get done with this chapter, you will realize that this is an evil monetary system, but this is the world we live in. We have to deal with it. You have to protect yourself and your family as best you can, and you have to do as well as you can in this environment until it is replaced with, hopefully, with something new, something fair, something honest. I want to thank you for watching this, the first part of the 8 parts of Chapter 4 of The Great Gold and Silver Rush of the 21st Century. Thank you very much. We'll see you in the next part. Thanks for watching, but this is by no means the whole story. If you want the full story, including my free online-only chapters and companion videos, there's a wealth of information at ggsr21.com. Thanks.